1908 in Siberia, an event called the Tunguska event, a massive 70-meter wide meteorite, only 70 meters wide, struck the forest in northern Russia and led to an explosion that was equal to several nuclear blasts, several Hiroshimas, leveled miles and miles and miles of forest with a massive impact. So we know, again, the only way an object could travel and survive the vast distances would be as if it's a massive meteorite, a massive object. And we know from history that during the 1990s we never had a massive meteoric impact on the Earth. So what were these objects doing streaking over such vast distances if they were indeed meteorites? It's curious. I'm not going to ride the UFO with these little objects, but it's a very, very curious scene. So the next part of the Russian space station mirror sequence I find really funny. This scene to me is humorous because what is actually happening, we have the day glow of the Earth here, the Earth's atmosphere here, the Earth is down here, and we see all these white dots, which we assume are stars. And the commentary is that the astronauts are actually looking for the Russian space station mirror. Mirror is a very big space station, and it's something you should be able to detect out there with your eyes and with cameras with zoom lenses on them. But the problem is, while they're looking for the mirror, there's a lot of other objects that are moving very slowly. You'll see big blobs of white that are moving really slowly in many different points across the screen. Now, if we're looking at stars, all of the stars with the movement of the space shuttle are going to be moving in a consistent line together in unison because they're not moving points of light. But distinguishable from the stars are other blobs of light moving around, and we also see a bunch of things that we're told are shooting stars coming in at right angles to the camera, coming into the Earth's atmosphere, and we see these things going in all sorts of different directions. We actually even see one that's leaving the Earth's atmosphere going out in this direction, which is something, again, impossible for a meteorite or a shooting star or even space debris to do, because anything leaving Earth's atmosphere requires internal energy, and internal energy requires and suggests intelligence.
Continuamos en la siguiente parte. Hola amigos de Factor Maya, aquí con la continuación de Evidencia, el caso en la NASA de los OVNIs.
So again, what's very disturbing, what's funny about it is they can't actually find the mirror because there's so many other things actually moving around out there.
This is Mission Control Houston. We are using the payload bay cameras right now to hopefully catch a glimpse of the Russian space station mirror as it performs an on-orbit burn. Though it will be difficult to pick mirror out from the stars as they pass behind us, the payload bay cameras are positioned such that they're looking straight back behind the orbiter, where the mirror is flying at about 850 nautical miles behind us.
No joy from here, sorry. Hope it was a good one though for our friends.
Thank you, sir. We could not see it here either. We'll wait 2 or 3 more minutes till sunrise, and then at that time give you a go for KU stow.
We're at a mission elapsed time of 7 days, 13 hours, and 17 minutes. This is Mission Control Houston. The Mir space station is now visible on the far left-hand side of the screen, about an inch from the bottom of this particular picture. Okay, the Mir space station is the small flashing light in the center, about an inch from the left-hand side of the screen. It's slowly... it is slowly moving closer to the left-hand side and is has a very light flashing to it.
We think on the middle of the screen, way to the left-hand side. We think you can see a flashing light just a little bit to the left of the center of the screen, very faint.
Yeah, we do see something flashing visually, but we're not sure that that might be...
This is Mission Control Houston. Once again, we believe we were just able to spot the Mir spacecraft as it flies about 850 nautical miles behind Discovery.
So you just saw the footage. You saw a lot of things streaking out there. You saw the confusion of the astronauts trying to find the space station Mir, and in the end, they never really find it. Again, if what we're looking at as the number one contention of NASA is everything on these videotapes is just debris floating by, and we're seeing optical illusions. Do you really think an astronaut can't tell the difference between the space station Mir and a piece of debris, a piece of dust, or a cookie crumb floating through space? Of course they can tell the difference. So whatever the other objects are that are moving around out there obviously aren't debris. They're other objects that are obscuring their view and are confusing the astronauts. But even more peculiar to me, the theory that the streaking objects are actually meteorites. If the streaking objects were really meteors, then why do they never appear in this video to burn up and disintegrate into the atmosphere? If they were meteors, they should behave like them. And even more curious, as the shuttle is flying 200 miles above the top of the atmosphere, why are we seeing meteors at all? In theory, they should be invisible, dark bodies until they strike the upper atmosphere and start to produce a meteoric burn, making them luminous and clearly visible. But many of these streaking objects are highly luminous, way above the top of the atmosphere. Could they be unidentified flying objects? In 1993, I met with and had a casual conversation with the head of the Russian space program. He didn't speak English, but through an interpreter, a young Russian woman, I asked him if the Russian cosmonauts had ever seen UFOs. He laughed but answered my question. We have never seen anything like that. If the cosmonauts had seen UFOs, I would be the first one to know about it. But there has been some evidence from the Russian cosmonauts saying they had actually seen flying saucers on recent missions to the Mir. A Russian cosmonaut named Alexander Baladin stated at a UFO convention that flying saucers have come into close proximity to the Mir space station many times. He added there is sufficient evidence to warrant a scientific study of the phenomena, and that it is time that world governments officially acknowledge the UFO phenomenon's existence. Baladin disclosed December 23, 1998, during an international ufology forum in Brazil, that he and fellow cosmonaut Musa Manarov had seen UFOs. During docking operations between his space capsule and the Mir, Baladin saw a glowing object a short distance away. Could these be the same lights that are being witnessed on this NASA Russian space station Mir sequence? Musa Manarov captured the UFOs on videotape that was shown during the UFO Congress in Brazil. Baladin claimed that the recording and other evidence presented during the Congress must be studied by an international scientific commission. Why were Russian cosmonauts coming forward to tell their stories while American astronauts wouldn't breathe a word? Were the Russian cosmonauts more excited about sharing information on intelligent contact with extraterrestrials and with the world than Americans? So I waited for the answer from Joseph Knuth, and considering the fact that Congress was already doing hearings into space shuttle footage, I expected a very, very negative answer, and that's what I got. The letter reads, Dear Mr. Sereda, I did look carefully at the video you sent, and I really must apologize to you for not replying sooner. The objects that were on the video appear to me to be floating debris from the cargo bay of the space shuttle. These objects often appear to be fuzzy because they got quite close to the camera and were often out of focus. Because they were so close, they also appear to travel at high speed, and any minor disturbance within the shuttle environment for example, outgassing, firing of attitude control thrusters, etc., is magnified enormously, thus the rapid turns. The spotty illumination and shadowing in the bay can also make objects suddenly appear or disappear. I saw a wealth of similar debris come up off the floor and out of many minor crevices during microgravity flights on the KC-135. The space shuttle is a notoriously dirty environment by any laboratory standards. That's why they always close up any shuttle service and buy the shuttle well before it gets too near. This is especially true for satellites such as the Hubble Space Telescope with high-precision optics. Again, I do apologize for not responding sooner. Signed, Joe Nuth.
The point of philosophy is to start with something so simple as not to seem worth stating, and to end with something so paradoxical that no one will believe it. Bertrand Russell.
The alternative space program theory hypothesizes that while NASA is launching the space shuttle and the Apollo missions to the moon, there is a secret, hidden space program that is going on behind closed doors. Deep inside of...
Continuamos en la siguiente parte. Hola amigos de Factor Maya, aquí con la continuación de Evidencia, el caso de la NASA de los OVNIs.
The point of philosophy is to start with something so simple as not to seem worth stating, and to end with something so paradoxical that no one will believe it. Bertrand Russell.
The alternative space program theory hypothesizes that while NASA is launching the space shuttle and the Apollo missions to the moon, there is a secret, hidden space program that is going on behind closed doors. Deep inside of secret Air Force bases and research labs, Black Ops projects are developing very, very high technology and high space technology vehicles that no one knows about, that only a few people know who are sequestered in these secret labs. Everyone has heard of Area 51 in Nevada at this point in time, and at Area 51, many people have gone out with video cameras and videotaped incredible objects glowing very brightly, shooting through the sky at amazing speeds, and even making angular turns, similar to some of the stuff we've seen on the NASA transmissions. So we asked the question, are some of these mysterious objects that are appearing on the NASA videos the alternative space program vehicles being witnessed by the cameras of the space shuttle themselves? NASA peering into the alternative space program, knowing very, very well of its existence, and actually studying the maneuverability and some of the capabilities of these aircraft. There are four major defense contractors in the United States. You have Boeing, you have Lockheed Martin, you have SAIC, and you have EG&G. EG&G, one of the largest of the four, in 1968, at the Nuclear Test Site Rocket Station, successfully tested Phobos 2A, the most powerful nuclear propulsion drive ever developed, was successful in 1968. Today, in the year 2001, we have to assume that nuclear propulsion systems are very, very advanced. But there's another problem. So far to date, most nuclear reaction systems that have been developed are very, very radioactive. Earlier I was talking about deuterium-helium-3 fusion developed by Bogdan Castle-Magwitch from MIT, and how that project produced a non-radioactive 18 million electron volt charge, and how that could be applied to not only powering space stations, but also driving the ion generators and ion propulsion systems for very, very fast space travel. But that system didn't get developed. So looking at how radioactive nuclear power sources are, we would expect, if one of these vehicles were flying around our skies, that the astronauts would have to wear tremendous shielding in the form of a spacesuit to protect them from severe levels of radiation. But yet, if anyone had ever actually encountered one of these craft on their own, they would be exposed to high levels of radiation. So we would need evidence of that fact. There are many evidence and many cases like that. Betty and Barney Hill, both people who were witnesses to a UFO event. They actually saw UFOs, they claim, and they actually have documented severe radiation burns on their body. Betty Cash, in 1980 in Texas, saw a UFO and pursued it, came into close proximity of this UFO. She received severe radiation burns for which she was hospitalized. Back in 1998, she died. No one knows for certain whether she died of the severe radiation burns that she received, but we do know that she received severe radiation burns. Now, if we're going to make a distinction between an extraterrestrial civilization spacecraft and an actual alternative space program space vehicle, this is where we would make our distinction. We can't assume that someone traveling from Alpha Centauri or Sirius coming here and traveling for 8.7 years would expose their bodies to high levels of radiation. They would die long before they even got here. So what the signature of one of these radioactive vehicles would be exactly like what happened to Betty Cash. And I think there are many other documented cases out there where people have encountered UFOs and received radiation burns. So it might be a signature, it might be an answer, pointing to the possibility that we have developed very, very advanced spacecraft, and we do have what may be UFOs in our own space programs, but somehow it hasn't really leaked out to the public.
The power of accurate observation is commonly called cynicism by those who have not got it. George Bernard Shaw.
So at this point in my investigation, I was beginning to not trust NASA. I was not really happy with the answers to the questions I sent them. And I detected they knew a lot more that they weren't telling me. So I decided to use the Freedom of Information Act request against Dr. Joseph Newt III and request that all files on this subject be delivered to me so that I could look deeper into it. The letter he wrote me back on February 24th, 1999. Dear Mr. Sereda, enclosed with this letter is my entire file on the matter in question, including the videotape that you so kindly sent to me for my comment. I did not send copies of my email replies to your previous email messages, as I infer from the content of this present letter that you retain your own copies of this correspondence. Since I'm not at all interested in the speculations of Dr. Lou Frank, and since my own research interests do not involve the data sets upon which these speculations are based, I have no other information on these matters other than that enclosed, all of which was sent by you. Signed, Dr. Joseph A. Newt III, Head, Astrochemistry Branch. P.S. Thanks for the great stamps. I had not seen anything like them previously. So at this point, Dr. Newt is saying that there is no other file at NASA. That my investigation that I'm conducting is the only file and the only investigation being done into this phenomena at NASA. I didn't know whether to believe it, but I didn't want to pursue him any further on that particular question. And I wanted to move on with our dialogue and see how much deeper I could go into this investigation. Later, I would have to try to contact Dr. Louis A. Frank myself and try to get a dialogue going with him. On February 25th, 1996, on Space Shuttle mission number STS-75, NASA launched a...
Continuamos en la siguiente parte. Hola amigos de Factor Maya, aquí con la continuación de Evidencia, el caso de la NASA de los OVNIs.
Many people sooner die than think. In fact, they do so. Bertrand Russell.
Edgar Mitchell, former astronaut who walked on the moon in 1971 during Apollo 14, has since become a major public advocate in the growing worldwide UFO movement. He speaks at UFO conventions all over the world. In a 1998 London Times news article, Mitchell was described as believing that aliens have landed on the Earth, and he has intensified his campaign to persuade Washington to acknowledge life beyond our skies. Mitchell argues that life is almost certain to exist on any other planet with a supportive environment. Some physicists, he points out, now believe it is possible to actually travel faster than the speed of light. he is 90% certain that many of the thousands of UFOs recorded since the 1940s, although some have been delusions and others natural phenomena, too many remain unexplained, he says. This suggests there are humanoids, manning craft, which have characteristics not in the arsenal of any nation on Earth that we know of. This is very alarming, he said. Edgar Mitchell holds a PhD from MIT and stands to be a perfect candidate in this particular NASA UFO investigation. Mitchell says his research, including conversations with people who have worked in intelligence agencies and military groups, have convinced him that the American government has covered up the truth about UFOs for 50 years. I thought if I sent Edgar Mitchell the tether footage from STS-75 that he could clearly see that we were looking at the largest UFOs ever captured on film. I wrote Apollo 14 astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell in October of 1999. On November 24th, 1999, Edgar Mitchell wrote me the following letter. David Sereda, yes, I have received your film and reviewed it and the info package you provided. I see utterly nothing about the tethered incident that is particularly interesting. If there is more reviewing footage, then I will look at it. However, I have looked at many feet of space film and have yet to see only one that has anything worth looking into regarding UFO appearances. Signed, Edgar Mitchell. I cannot accept the idea that such a great proponent of UFOs was so adamantly against the suggestion that these giant circles passing behind the tethered satellite were UFOs. He was shrugging off the most astounding piece of video ever witnessed of UFOs in the history of the space program. I couldn't believe it. Dr. Mitchell, who was an MIT PhD, could not even acknowledge that the discs were clearly going behind the 12-mile length of the tether. He couldn't even see that very simple fact. I think just about any moron can tell the difference between when a disc is going behind this piece of wood and when it's going in front of it. That's in front, that is behind. This is not in front, this is behind. And that's exactly how they appear. Why couldn't Edgar Mitchell see this point? I decided to try to argue the points with Mitchell more precisely. He wrote me back almost immediately. David, at first glance they are just particles, perhaps outcast. I do not know. But I certainly would look for a more prosaic explanation than UFOs. If you have a better film, I will look at it, but I am not very optimistic that they are anything exotic. Signed, Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Mitchell wrote to me that he thought the objects were just particles, perhaps outgassed from the space shuttle. How does a particle appear to be visible from over 77 miles away? We're looking, the cameras on the space shuttle are at least 77 miles away and drifting past 100 miles. How do you see just little particles of dust floating by that appear as perfect giant circles with notches cut out of the side, clearly passing behind the tether, pulsing with very sophisticated wave patterns? How do particles behave like this? Maybe I have to relearn and reinvestigate particle theory to understand some of these ideas, these ridiculous ideas that some of these scientists are coming up with. He wrote me back the following letter on December 3rd, 1999. David Sereda, I remained open-minded, but I saw nothing on the tape you sent that had sharply defined edges in the vicinity of or passing behind the tether. Also in the footage of the tether, the commentator on the spacecraft is making a running commentary. For really anything of significance in space around the tether at that time, don't you think they would have been saying something about it? If they were as big as you say, they would have been visible to the naked eye and surely reported, not ignored as seems to be the case. You comment about no infrared images. Of course not. If nothing is there, how could there be an infrared image? Signed, Edgar Mitchell. The first point that Dr. Mitchell makes here is that I saw nothing on the tape that had sharply defined edges in the vicinity of or passing behind the tether. It reveals that he is ignoring just how defined the edges of these huge discs are and how sharply defined they are as they travel behind very clear edges of the tether. More precisely about the tether, we remember the Huntsville, Alabama NASA operator asking the crew,
"And how wide does that tether appear to be? It seems to resemble a much wider strand than we'd expect. Can you describe which way the satellite is visible on that strand?"
The 12-mile-long tether cable was only a tenth of a centimeter in thickness and should not have been visible from over 77 miles away. There was no answer to why it appeared so thick because the shuttle astronauts did not know the answer then. But on Wednesday, February 28, 1996, of the NASA STS-75 Day 7 highlights, they recorded the very reason, as the scientists report that they can measure sunlight-induced electrical charge on the tether and satellite as it moves through the daylight and night portions of its orbit around the Earth. Because the tether was charged with energy constantly by the highly charged particles in space and from the ionosphere, it produced a magnetic field around it which became sunlit and very visible. But also the report revealed that nitrogen gas from the satellite had been emptied and the gas would have become ionized, which could have produced a neon tube-like effect. This all explained precisely why the tether appeared so thick from so far away. It had nothing to do with the glare or out-of-focus theories.
Well, I tried to do a quick, good job here adjusting the cameras.
Copy that.
Satellite now 100 nautical miles.
You completely unzoomed and you see the full extent of the tether. I'm trying to adjust the focus, but I can't get better than that.
Okay, Claude. Thank you.
Let me zoom in now.
So precisely, the UFOs can be seen passing behind the thickness of the tethers, sunlight-induced electrical charge, and ionized gas. The light shining off of the tether and the energized field obscures the light shining from the UFOs precisely because the UFOs are passing behind the tethered satellite. These are all facts that Dr. Mitchell was unaware of.
This view showing
Continuamos en la siguiente parte. Hola amigos de Factor Maya, aquí con la continuación de evidencia del caso de la NASA de los OVNIs.
the satellite.
Dr. Mitchell was obviously not considering the NASA astronauts talking about the UFOs on alternate Department of Defense encrypted radio channels, probably because they did not have them during his own Apollo 14 mission to the moon. During long pauses between words, we might assume that the astronauts and NASA control operators are talking on Department of Defense secure channels encrypted to prevent anyone from tapping into their conversations about classified information, such as unidentified flying objects. When Dr. Mitchell finished by saying, "You comment on no infrared image," of course not. If nothing is there, how could there be an infrared image? Dr. Mitchell was obviously completely unaware of how objects that are vibrating with electromagnetic energy higher in frequency than the human eye can see, such as the near ultraviolet range of light, can actually exist but be undetectable in the visible and infrared ranges of light. Perhaps such observations required advanced ideas in quantum physics that he was not prepared to accept at the time. On February 18, 1999, I received the following letter from Dr. Joseph Newth III. Dear Mr. Sereda, I did look carefully at the video we sent, and I really must apologize to you for not replying sooner. The objects that were on the video appear to me to be floating debris from the cargo bay of the space shuttle. These objects often appear to be fuzzy because they got quite close to the camera and were often out of focus. End quote. The test that you just saw, I showed a video camera here on a tripod, and I held a set of keys only 4 or 5 inches away from the camera, and you could see that they were very in focus. In the background, somewhere around 100 feet away, was the tree that you saw. The point that Dr. Newth makes about the video cameras on the space shuttle, that objects as they got close to the camera appeared very fuzzy and became out of focus, and some disappearing altogether, doesn't seem to really hold up here, because Video cameras don't actually work the same way optical cameras do. A regular 35mm camera, as you're focused on a distant object, as objects come close to the camera, they get very fuzzy. In fact, they can disappear altogether. But it's not the case with video cameras that have CCD imaging chips inside of them that actually process the images